I am a scavenger, a black scavenger. No, I don't search for treasures, hoards, or raid ancient burial sites. I don't hunt for relics or artifacts. I dig up and collect scrap metal, black metal, selling it to make a living. And let me tell you, I make pretty decent money doing it. I've been doing this for 2 years now. Ever since I lost my job and ended up disabled. Who needs a middle-aged man with a limp who spent most of his life behind the wheel? First driving a city bus, then a dump truck, and finally a big rig? It was on that last job that I got into an accident. My right leg was shattered, my right arm badly broken. The doctor's verdict was final. I could never professionally drive again. That was a death sentence for my career. It took me 3 long months to recover, 3 months of loneliness, with only the occasional visit from my friends or my grown son. I had to figure out what to do next. How was I going to make a living? I had to rebuild my entire life from scratch. My son lived in my apartment. He got married a year ago, no kids yet. I gave him the place because, for the past 5 years, my home had been the cab of a German man truck. I lived at my country house, a place I built with my own hands, with good repairs, heating, plumbing, and a sewage system. My ex-wife and I divorced when our son was in college. I still regret it, but there's no going back. She found someone else and is happy now. We have a good relationship, though. She calls sometimes to check on me, and I always send her a big bouquet of flowers for her birthday. We also see each other at our son's birthday parties, and, well, that's pretty much it. After the accident, I spent a month in the hospital, then 2 months at the country house, eating, sleeping, reading books, and watching TV. I had enough savings to last a year if needed. Plus, I got an insurance payout, and my former boss even sent me some money. He offered me a job as a mechanic, repairing trucks, but with my leg and arm, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. I thanked him but declined. At that point, I had no intention of becoming a scavenger, never even considered it, but life had its own plans. The accident that changed everything. The crash happened on February 23rd. A Mercedes Sprinter lost control on an icy road and veered straight into my truck. The impact was brutal. I got out of it with broken bones. The van driver did too. After a month in the hospital, I was discharged. My son offered to let me stay with him, but I refused. At first, living alone at the country house was tough. With a cast on my leg and arm, even the simplest things were a struggle. But people adapt, and so did I. Looking back now, I laugh at how hard it was to do basic things. Going to the bathroom, taking a shower, cooking food. It's funny now, but back then, I wanted to cry. For a month, I hobbled around on crutches. Then they took off the cast from my arm and later from my leg. I had to learn to walk again. I was cautious, afraid to put too much weight on my leg, afraid to fall. But as my ex-wife used to joke, you heal like a dog, and she wasn't wrong. As soon as I could move around with crutches, I decided to clean up my garage and yard. That job took me an entire day, but by evening I had filled my trailer with scrap metal. The next morning, I hauled it to a scrapyard. Nearly a ton of metal, enough for a solid payday. That's when it clicked. I could make money from scrap. With my disability, finding a well-paying job was nearly impossible. But this was something I could do. I was my own boss. I had nothing to lose, so I decided to give it a shot. My old Toyota Land Cruiser 80 was in excellent shape. Sure, it was old, but I took care of it. Never delayed repairs, changed out parts on time, and it had never once let me down. I don't even remember ever getting a flat tire. At first, my scavenging had mixed results. Some days I'd find over 1,000 pounds of scrap. Other times I'd go days without finding anything. The areas around the city had already been picked clean by others like me. So I bought a metal detector. That changed everything. Now I could find buried tank tracks, old plows, metal pipes, beams, and rebar. Digging them up was hard work, especially with my injured hand, but I never backed down from a challenge. That first year, I scoured every nearby field, every abandoned village and farm. Pickings were slim. These areas had been looted before, but I still made enough to get through the winter. Winters were tough for scavenging, so I took the season off. I read books, went ice fishing, and mapped out future search locations. The following year, I expanded my search area. 7 months of backbreaking work later, I had hauled in over 90,000 pounds of scrap, nearly doubling my earnings from the year before. This year, spring came early. By late March, the snow had melted, and I was back to digging through the mud. One of my first stops was an abandoned farm 25 miles from town. The dirt road leading to it hadn't been driven on in years. Before taking my truck through, I walked the last mile to check for deep ruts and puddles. It looked risky, but I had confidence in my Land Cruiser. Solid axles front and rear, full locking differentials, off-road tires, and 2 winches. I trusted my rig. And I was right. It tore through the muddy trail like a beast, towing my empty trailer with ease. The farm was in ruins. Its roof had collapsed, a brick fence was leaning at an angle, and scattered remains of buildings lay in silence. No signs of life. I got out of the truck and looked around before heading toward the ruins. I spent over an hour inspecting the site, and my mood lifted. There was a lot of metal here: pipes, machinery parts, beams. Some of it was half buried, some needed cutting, and some just required brute force to break loose. Clearly, other scavengers had been here before, but they had left behind anything that required serious effort. Their loss. By early afternoon, I had worn myself out swinging a sledgehammer. I had only collected about 400 pounds of metal, not much, but better than nothing. I took a break, eating a roasted chicken leg and boiled eggs, washing it down with hot tea from a thermos. Then I pulled out my metal detector and started mapping the site, marking spots where metal lay buried. I worked until sunset, finding more than I expected, but retrieving it would take time and effort. I decided to leave the farm for now, come back later when I didn't feel like searching for new spots. That became my routine, scouting locations, marking them on my map, then returning when I needed an easier payday. I hit several other abandoned farms in the following weeks. Some seemed picked clean, but with my metal detector, I still uncovered valuable finds. It was hard work, but worth it. I kept at it, digging up metal until May, when fate introduced me to Old Man Mitch.